Previously, we looked at the important role that veterans played, returning from war, advocating for their rights, and this was particularly the case after World War II. Now remember, millions of Americans were returning home, and veterans were not a community that could be easily ignored. So the veterans that had disabilities were advocating for rights, rehabilitation, services, and opportunity. And now this overlapped with the polio epidemics of the 1940s and 50s, which left hundreds of thousands in need of improved access. Now, we've already seen the variety of ways that organizations advocated and worked for improved access and understanding. And in 1961, the American National Standards Institute set accessibility standards, and they called this American Standards Specifications for Making Buildings Accessible to and Usable by the Physically Handicapped. Yes, those were the terms that they used in 1961. And this helped pave the way for the Architectural Barriers Act of 1968 and then the Fair Housing Act of 1968, both of which required the development of accessible space, accessible buildings, and accessible housing for people with disabilities. In 1963, the British architect Selwyn Goldsmith published his Designing for the Disabled, offering the concept of designing for access. And he was the originator of curb cuts, which would become so important for opening up urban space, as we've already seen in the course. All of these developments influenced Ronald Mace, who championed the idea that we can design the built environment to make it accessible for all people, no matter their age or their ability or anything. And he called this universal design. Ronald Mace had contracted polio in 1950 when he was 9 years old, which, like others that we've seen in the course, Ed Roberts, Justin Dart, Judy Heumann, made him a wheelchair user as a result. Mace attended North Carolina State University, where he studied architecture, graduating in 1966. But his time at the university was a daily reminder of how design could also serve as a barrier to access and inclusion and opportunity if the designer gave no attention, no thought to accessibility and inclusion of all people. So Mace began his career as an architect and also as an advocate for greater accessibility in the design of buildings, first achieving success on a state level in the 1970s, and then this influenced the federal legislation in the 1980s, leading up to the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Mace founded the Center for Universal Design in 1989, that was then called the Center for Accessible Housing, and the name was changed later. And this was a think tank and a research center on the topic. Universal design makes the space accessible for all using the following principles: equitable use, flexibility in use, making things simple and intuitive, perceptible information, designing for tolerance for error, ensuring low physical effort is needed, and considering the size and space for approach and for use, as you see on the image here on the screen. In addition to the development of design principles, technology has also adapted to support greater inclusion. And we can see this with much improved prosthetic devices, with teletypewriters, that is the TTY technology, serving as telecommunication systems for those with hearing impairment. We also see digital readers for those with visual impairments, which made accessible entire libraries of books. And let's add the rise of voice recognition software, accelerating particularly since the 1990s, and this made it possible for many people with disabilities to operate computers. And let's add augmentative alternative communication, AAC devices, which have literally given voice to those for whom speech was impossible. Such devices made it possible to listen to, say, a lecture by the physicist Stephen Hawking. He had received his BA in physics from Oxford University and his PhD from Cambridge in 1965, and then he became faculty at Cambridge University. But before finishing his PhD, Hawking was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also known as motor neuron disease, or in the United States, as Lou Gehrig's disease. And this slowly deteriorated his body's muscles. As faculty, Hawking dictated his articles and gave lectures with the help of assistants, and his research, academic insight, and clarity of explanation propelled his career to extraordinary heights. In 1979, he was elected Lucasian Professor of Mathematics. Now that's a prestigious position, once held by the likes of Isaac Newton. By 1985, Dr. Hawking had lost the use of his voice, communicating first by eye movement on a letterboard, and in 1986 through voice synthesizer, through which he taught and he wrote, publishing his Brief History of Time in 1998. And this is a book that has sold a mere 25 million copies. Dr. Hawking has been the recipient of dozens of professional awards, ranging from the Albert Einstein Medal in 1979 to the U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2009, and he passed away in 2018, aged 76. Another voice that we hear in this course who relies on such assistive technology is that of the poet Lateef MacLeod, whose poetry you have read already in this course, and this week you have his essay on the topic, Gaining Power Through Communication Access, in the Disability Visibility Collection edited by Alice Wong. Such technology was essential for allowing people with disabilities to engage the world and for providing opportunities for them to express themselves and their talents. And this meant that such technology was essential for their educational needs. And so, in 1986, the Education of the Handicapped Act, that is now the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, was amended to include assistive technology. In 1988, the Technology-Related Assistance for Individuals with Disabilities Act was passed, requiring that states seek to provide assistive technology to their constituents with disabilities. So this is known as the TECH Act. Assistive technology and adaptive devices continue to play a central role in the efforts to promote accessibility and inclusion. But we should keep in mind that these are assistive to the individual, to the person, to the human who uses them. This is the rationale behind the work of American designer Sarah Hendren, who reimagined the representation of and relationship to adaptive devices. One of her projects was a revision to the international symbol of access, the stick figure in the wheelchair that is familiar throughout the world, with a new design, which has since been adopted in some locales as an official emblem. Now take a moment to compare the two images. How do they differ? And what is she trying to say?